Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Um, there we go. So when I do the Kickstart program for CalSPRA, and I also teach a class usually every year at the conference in NSPRA. Oops, why are we going automatically now? Sorry, I did something wrong here. Okay, there we go. When I teach the APR prep course at CalSPRA or NSPRA, I usually start by giving an official definition of public relations because I'm aware that not everybody started their career working in public relations, as we heard this morning. So if you decide to pursue your APR, this top definition here is something you're going to definitely want to memorize because it's probably going to show up on the computerized test. And it's kind of a clunky definition that says public relations is the management function that establishes and maintains mutually beneficial relationships between an organization and the public on whom its success or failure depends. That's kind of a mouthful. And what I normally would do at this point, if we were all sitting around a table together, is challenge you to come up with a simpler explanation that is more directly connected to your work. But I went ahead and did that for you since we're in this format. I would say that for us who work in school PR, that school public relations is the management function that maintains positive relationships between school districts and the communities they serve, our students, our parents, our civic and business leaders, and everybody who contributes to the success or failure of our schools. So one way to think about this is that earning your APR is going to help you to do this better. So what is accreditation in public relations, or APR? It's a voluntary certification program for public relations professionals. So it's a little bit different than something like a CPA. My husband is a CPA, and he had to go to school to get that certification, and it's a much harder designation to get than ours. That being said, and you cannot practice accounting, actually, or at least his type of accounting, without having that. So this is a little bit different. It's a little bit more informal in that it's voluntary. Many people practice public relations without having their APR. But the reason for it is really to unify the standards of our profession and to advance it so that there's a marker of the professionals who have proven or demonstrated that they have broad knowledge of our field and a certain level of experience. And I believe in it because I really believe that it improves public relations practice. It within NSPRA and CalSPRA, I do believe it's a signifier of experience. And if you look at a lot of the practitioners who have been at this the longest, many of them do have their APR. So in CalSPRA, we have about 25 to 30 APRs out of a membership of, Nathan, you might know better than me, but I think we're at about 400 members right now. So maybe a little bit less than 10%, but we've had a huge uptick in APRs just in the last year or so. So since 2013, we've had about 13 of our members attain APR status, but 7 of those were just last year, which was incredible and really exciting. And right now we have about 30 members, including all of you, who are considering pursuing an APR or in process. So here are some of the reasons why this is not surprising at all, but people do this because they want to enhance
one of the
their
biggest
career.
things for all these trainings is
I'm sorry, can everybody mute, please? Yeah, people pursue APR to enhance their career growth, to do a better job. And I'll just take a minute here and tell you the reason why I've chosen for such a long time to serve as APR chair of CalSPRA and to serve on the APR committee for NSPRA. And it really comes down to my commitment to public schools and to our students, because I think that the public school system really has a huge PR problem. We're not part of the problem because all of us are members of CalSPRA and NSPRA. We're doing our part to promote good public schools, but we could do it even better if we upped our game. And I really believe that earning your APR is going to help you up your game in promoting your own schools and promoting the public school system in general. So who administers the APR? Well, there is an organization or a coalition called the Universal Accreditation Board. And the school public relations industry is only one part of, or one member out of 9 organizations that are part of the UAB. Somebody mentioned Capio earlier. They're part of it. Public Relations Society of America is part of it, as well as some of these other organizations. And each one of the member organizations has a representative who sits on the UAB board, and they're part of determining the standards. They decide when it's time to revise the test, whether the procedures and requirements to earn APR need to be adapted. And what the UAB does is they, as I just said, they implement the policies. They also provide resources. I highly recommend going on their website, and the URL link is up here. They maintain the examination for accreditation, and in a minute I'm going to talk through the process. But basically it's sort of a 2-step process. Step 1 is that you go before a panel of 3 accredited professionals and you demonstrate your knowledge of the field. And then if you are passed through that level, you take a standardized test. It's about a 3-hour online test that assesses your understanding of the profession. Also, the UAB is the official grantor. So once you go through the process, they're the ones who will inform you that you've passed. They also review appeals. If for some reason you don't pass and you think it was unfair, they are the governing board that would determine that. So who's eligible to earn an APR? So what is recommended, and it's interesting that they use the word recommended and not required, but they do recommend 5 years of paid full-time experience in public relations. I often get questions about this, especially from people who come from a journalism background, whether or not their time in journalism counts. And I personally don't feel equipped to answer that question. So I will just say that if you're not 100% sure, what I would like to do is just talk to you offline, and then I would send a question to our UAB representative in New York and ask her for a determination. I think, it's somewhat situational depending on what your job is, how long you've been doing it, and what you did in your previous job. But 5 years is sort of the general guideline. So there is a fee connected. It costs $385 for the processing. In NSPRA, if you are an NSPRA member, they will rebate you $110 toward that cost. There are also some other costs. If you choose to sign up for the online course, that can be an additional cost, and you will more than likely need to purchase some books and resources. So I was asked the other day, will districts reimburse for this? It really depends on the policy of your own district, but I will say that this is definitely a legitimate professional development expenditure. I would say even more so than attending a conference. And if that is being questioned by your district, I would certainly be happy to send a communication to your superintendent or to whoever is making that decision. So again, it depends on your district's policy, but it is a legitimate professional development expense. Once you earn your APR, you have it for life. There are some maintenance requirements. You have to earn a certain number of points, and every 3 years you have to turn in a form demonstrating. It's not hard to earn the points. You earn points by serving on a board, by giving a presentation at CalSPRA or NSPRA. You can serve on a panel evaluation for somebody who's earning their APR. There's a lot of different ways you can get points, and it's not hard at all. I usually end up with I was really worried about that beforehand, but I always end up with probably about double the number of points I need. So what is the focus of the APR? It's to help you develop expertise in these areas. One is, probably the biggest area is the area of research and planning PR programs. So you're going to hear a lot about either the 4-step planning process is one name for it, or RPI, research planning, implementation, and evaluation. So you're going to learn the components of having an effective public relations plan. A lot of the awards that you see given out at CalSPRA and NSPRA, they are given out because um, the four steps have been used, and that's generally why they have success. Other areas that you're going to study in the APR are ethics and law. You're going to learn about managing issues in crisis communication. You're going to delve a little bit into theory. I personally found that to be the most difficult area. There are some complex theories of communication, and that's going to not show up so much in your in-person presentation before your panel, but when you take that standardized test, there will be questions about that. It also focuses on leadership, and I'm sure you've all heard people at our conferences talk about having a seat at the table. And we all want to um, be advising our superintendents and our colleagues on cabinet. And part of what you're going to learn are, techniques and attributes of strong leadership in public relations, and that will include managing relationships within your organization and outside of your organization. By the way, if you notice that my eyes are looking up, it's because I'm using a screen out beyond this one, so I apologize if that looks weird. How long does it take to become accredited? That is the most common question I get asked. And it honestly depends on you. I've seen it done as quickly as 6 months. I spent about 6 months on my accreditation, but that was during the Great Recession. And part of the reason I was able to do that is because my job got cut in half and I had time available. Somebody told me the other day that they earned their APR essentially in about 3 months. That would be insane. I don't really even know how that is possible, but this person did do it. And it's a professional that I really respect. So you can really fast track it. I've also known people who spent 2 or 3 years. So and later on, I'm going to show you some possible timelines. You drive the timeline. It depends on how much time you want to devote to it, and also what's going on in your personal life, and just how you like to work. If you're one of those people who just likes to throw yourself in full force and get something done, then the shorter timeline might be for you. So let's talk a little bit about the steps. So after this call, what I would advise you to do is step number 1 would be to go to that website that I projected earlier and understand the steps that are involved in earning your APR. If you don't get all your answers today in this call, I'm certainly happy to talk to you. One of the reasons I did the call is there's just actually so much interest right now that it's time consuming for me to spend an hour with each person who's interested, but I am more than happy if you have some specific issue or question you want to ask, please just shoot me an email and we can schedule a time to talk. So on that website, there are a wealth of resources. There are FAQs. There is a process chart that shows you everything you have to go through. You can even go on the website and look at the matrix that the panelists use to evaluate you when you get to that point of the process. So you can also sign up for the online course, which I'll talk about in a minute. So step 1, go to that website and look around in it and understand what you're embarking on. So once I know that you're serious about the process, we have many APRs in CalSPRA and NSPRA that are not only willing, but eager to mentor somebody. One thing that I've really found is there's a community around APR, and the people who have gone through this process are very proud of it, and they really want to pay it forward. And so, again, we're getting to the point now. I used to personally mentor every CalSPRA member. It's getting beyond my capacity to do that, but fortunately, we have so many great APRs in CalSPRA that it will be very easy for me to pair you with somebody. Step number 4, if you really are ready to take the step and go forward, what I strongly recommend is that you sign up for the online study course. So this is a course that is offered through the UAB. I believe they meet every week, and they have 3 cohorts a year. So they'll do a fall cohort, a winter cohort, and a spring cohort. I think that's right. Fall, or maybe fall, winter, and summer. And you will be meeting with people inside and outside of school PR, so public relations professionals. They might be from all over the country. Every week there's a lecture and homework, and then you also will be interacting with the other people in your cohort. I'm told that for people who take the online study course, I did not do that, but I'm told that the pass rate is something like 98% for the people who actually go through every week of the course. And you can stay in the course indefinitely. So say you sign up in the fall and something huge blows up in your district and you miss half the classes, you can keep going in the spring, you can keep going in the summer, and I don't think you have to repay every time. They just started the fall cohort, so you've kind of missed that sign up. The next one starts in January. I'll also tell you that I have been in discussions just in the last 2 weeks with the president of NSPRA, and it is really her desire for NSPRA to launch something like this that's directed especially at school PR professionals, and possibly that would have a lower cost. So, I mean, we are just in the very early stages of starting to talk about this, but stay tuned because that is something that might be available coming down the pipeline. So during the course of taking the online course or working with a study group, at some point, you are going to need to identify a campaign that you can use to present as a case study. And this is, again, probably one of the things that I most get asked about. I think a lot of folks get very intimidated by this, and they have the idea that they have to run a massive marketing campaign or do something really big to show. That is not the case. I just want to tell you right now that the purpose of having a portfolio to share with your panel is to demonstrate that you understand the principles of public relations. It can be something as simple as, I heard one person describe that their district moved to an online enrollment and registration system, and they needed to get every single parent in their district to on board with this new enrollment session. So they wrote a 4-step plan for it. So it wasn't a really big deal. They did a Survey Monkey to try to find out, whatever information they needed. They designed some collateral material and a social media campaign. They conducted it, and then they evaluated it. So it doesn't have to be something enormous. It's just something where you're going to go through the 4 steps of the planning process that you learn about. Once you get to this point, the next step is you're going to submit an application to pursue the APR, to the Universal Accreditation Board. This is just a 1-page application. It's like your name, your address, your email address, how many years you've practiced, what organization you're applying through. So I used to tell people that this was step number 1, and I finally learned that that's a really bad idea, because once you submit this application, that's when you pay your $385. This is when you're notifying the UAB that you are now starting the process, and you have 12 months from that day to complete it. So the clock starts ticking. So then you really are on time pressure. So what some of us have learned along the way is wait to do that until you're well into the process. Wait until you've completed the online study course, or wait until you've done your self-study. Then submit that application. And then at that point, you have 12 months to complete your panel presentation and take the computerized test. When you get to that point where you have sent in your application to the UAB, I would like to know that you're getting close so that I can start thinking about who I want to serve on your panel. It used to be a lot harder for CalSPRA for me to set up panels because we're a statewide organization. And so if Nathan needs a panel and he's in Merced, I have to find 3 APRs who are within drivable distance of Nathan. And that was harder in the past. And only after COVID started did the UAB allow Zoom panel presentations, but they allow them now, and it has been fantastic. I've already personally participated in a few. I sat on a panel for an NSPRA member in Upper New York State who there were no APRs to serve on his panel in a hour radius of where he lives. And so it was so fantastic that we were able to do it virtually. And then I've also arranged a few for candidates who are even out of state. So once you're close, let me know, and then I'm going to start thinking about who might be able to serve on your panel. There is a questionnaire that you fill out prior to having the panel, and that is a really important step that is often overlooked. And it's almost like a narrative resume. So you can see it when you go on the UAB website, but it asks you a lot of questions about your role in your organization, how your organization is structured, whether you are advising leaders in your organization. Um, it asks you to evaluate your organization in terms of its communications and public relations. And through this questionnaire, you answer this and you provide maybe 200, 250 words per question. And that is going to go to the panel before you go before the panel. So when you have your panel presentation, you're not only presenting a case study, but you're responding to questions from your panel about how you answered this questionnaire. And it's really a way for you to demonstrate, again, that you understand the principles of public relations. So that's a really important step. And that's something that if you're working with a mentor, you're really going to want your mentor to review that with you, maybe even multiple times. And then the day will come when you go before the panel and you have your panel presentation. And what happens during a panel presentation? Well, you're going to respond to questions, as I just said, about your questionnaire, and you're going to present your portfolio. Normally, the first half, it's about a 2-hour presentation. The first half is just going to be conversation about the questionnaire. They're going to be probing to understand. They might say something to you like, if it's a school PR panel, they might say to you, you're facing this type of a crisis in your district and your superintendent comes to you and asks you for advice. What are you going to tell him? They might say to you, what would you do if your superintendent wanted to pursue a communication strategy and you knew that that strategy was going to hurt the reputation of the district? How would you go about persuading him? How would you, him or her, how would you interact with your colleague who was arguing with you in a cabinet meeting about a communication strategy? So, I mean, those are the type of things that might come up in your panel presentation. And then in the second hour, you're going to present your case study, whatever it is that you've chosen to focus on. They're going to then, after that 2 hours is up, they're going to excuse you. They're going to put their heads together, and they have a matrix that they use to evaluate you. And they go through a scoring process. It's pretty intricate, and it's very respectful toward the candidates. It really is designed to, if each panelist evaluates you and at the end you don't have enough points to move forward, they are required to talk about it and then go through a second scoring, just to make sure that it's fair. And then you don't know when you leave that panel presentation. Usually they don't tell you whether you passed or not. They dismiss you, they score you, and then those scores are all sent to the UAB. And then about 10 days later, the UAB will notify you. There are some exceptions to that. I know at NSPRA, if you get evaluated at NSPRA, they generally tell you right on the spot whether they're advancing you or not. So it somewhat depends on your panel. If you disagree with the results, if you think you should have advanced and you didn't, you can appeal it and you can redo your panel presentation 2 times. Once you get approved, once you pass through that step, then they're going to let you know that you can sign up to take the computerized exam. And again, it depends on when you started that clock ticking. But if you started the clock ticking in January, you do your panel presentation in February, then you have until December to take your computerized exam. So let's talk for a minute on the exam. On the slide, I won't read all of these, but this shows you kind of how it's weighted. And as you can see, the biggest amount goes into that research, planning, implementing, and evaluating programs area that I talked about before. So it's really important to grasp that, probably more than anything else. The test is hard. When I took this test, and it was 10 years ago, I think the last time I had taken a standardized test like that was, when I was in high school doing my college entrance testing. So, for some of us, it's pretty scary when you're, 50 years old and it might be the first time you've taken a standardized test in 30 years. Um, and it's hard. It's very scenario based. So the test will say things like, and it's outside of just school PR. So it might say, you're working for a chemical company, and at 6 o'clock in the morning, your phone rings and you're informed that there's been an explosion at the plant. The TV crews are headed over to the plant right now. What's the first thing you're going to do? And it gives you four choices: A, B, C, or D. And each one of them might sound pretty reasonable. Maybe one of the four sounds really dumb, and for sure you would not do C, but you're like, A, yeah, that's reasonable. B, that's reasonable. C, no. D, possibly. And you have to pick, what's the first thing you're going to do. So that's just to give you an example of the type of thing that might show up on the test. The good news is, though, you do not have to get an A on this test. I think you have to get like 63% right or something like that. So I know when I was taking it, and you find your results out immediately. So you're sitting there for 3 hours in this testing center, and all you have in front of you is a piece of paper and a pencil. And then at the end, you can see your results. And I know my heart was just pounding because I wasn't really sure that I got 64% right, but I really did. I did way better than that. So it feels really hard, but I will say that I don't want to jinx anybody, but I don't know of anybody in the last 7 or 8 years in CalSPRA who has not passed the test. So you can do this. Everybody who's on this call can pass. So planning, what do you need to do? Well, the first thing is to think about the timeline and consider the rhythm of your job and consider what's going on in your life. I don't know about everybody else, but when I was working at the school district, the one time I would definitely not want to do this is this time of year. For me, summer and fall were really my very busiest times. And I usually noticed in a normal year when we don't have a pandemic and fires, that I started feeling a little easing up in my work life, usually around Thanksgiving. And it usually stayed, a little bit more calm and quiet until spring when we started planning for next year and had graduations and everything. That was just me. I mean, your job might be very different, but I would definitely think about that. Think about your rhythms. If you're having a baby or planning to get married, probably not the best year to do your APR, unless actually our president, Jen, she actually did do this when she actually did do her APR when she had a baby because she had a maternity leave and she was able to use some of that time for her studying. So again, it's every person is somewhat different. Here are some sample timelines that I put together. I would not take these too literally. It's really just to give you an idea of how you might approach this. And I'm not going to go through this in detail on this call. You can study it later, but it just sort of gives you an idea of how to pace yourself. It is nice to think about finishing at a time when you can be recognized at CalSPRA and NSPRA. We started a tradition about a year ago of recognizing our APRs at the CalSPRA conference in March. So it'd be nice to finish in time. If you're getting close to that, try to finish before March rather than in April or May, although we'll recognize you the next year. And the same with NSPRA. If you're going to the NSPRA conference, they always do a ceremony the first day of the conference and they recognize everybody who's earned their APR. So it's nice to get it done before May so you can get that recognition at the conference in July. Here are some resources. These are just articles. I serve on the APR committee for NSPRA, and last year our committee wrote 3 different articles. These might be helpful to you, so please feel free to look them up. And at that, I will stop screen sharing and take your questions. So sorry for all the talking, but what questions do you all have for me?
Naomi, you have made everything so crystal clear that I don't have any questions. I feel very well prepared and have a good understanding of the timeline. I think just glancing at that scenario, I'm ready to go with scenario 1. So I'm going to start planning and studying it this fall. And then I completely agree with you as far as how my work life works. When it's really busy, this is the busiest time of the year. So the next few months here, I'll have time to really take a look at that. And then January, and then hopefully by December of next year, I have it. So thank you so much for planning this, for hosting these sessions. Super helpful.
Yeah, and I think it's good. This is the busy time of year, but one thing is this is a great time to have the conversation because it can kind of be, you can kind of be thinking about it in the background of your mind so that when December, that quieter time comes in December, you can dive in. How about anything else?
I want to thank you, Naomi, for simplifying the process. I loved the slides. And like I said, I was hesitant in the beginning because it just seems such an overwhelming thought.
Yeah.
But the simplification has made it easy. So I'm definitely going to look at all the different scenarios and figure out when it's best for me to pursue this.
Okay, good. I think what I'll do, because there is a lot of interest right now, it's been a little while since I communicated with everybody who's expressed interest in the past, but I'll try to send an email out to everybody in CalSPRA who's attended one of these sessions or a session in the past, because I think one thing that's really helpful is to have a cohort and you guys can connect with each other. So that's one way to do it. And I have a Facebook group too for aspiring CalSPRA APR. Some of you I think are on it, but if you're not, please send a request. I'm embarrassed to say there were a couple of people that I didn't let into the group because it was not clear to me that they were part of CalSPRA. So if I inadvertently didn't admit you, send me another request to join that Facebook group. I think it's just called CalSPRA APR. Any other questions?
I actually do have a question. So, not growing up in this industry, can you talk a little bit about the different expectations work on as far as your own development in terms of multimedia, like how fancy do your presentations have to be?
Oh, okay. Not fancy. The emphasis is not, in fact, I was just having this conversation with somebody who served as a panelist, and she said one of the things that most disappoints her is when she's on a panel and somebody puts all this effort into making a really, really fancy PowerPoint or binder to share, but the principles that they're expressing in that fancy presentation are weak. So the idea is to demonstrate that you understand, not to demonstrate that you're really good at graphics. So, I mean, graphics might be part of your strategy for communicating. And so you also don't want to look messy, but it's the emphasis in the panel is definitely on the strategic thinking behind it.
Great, thank you.
All right, well, I will, I'm going to post this PowerPoint on the CalSPRA listserv later today. And if there are any other things you think of later, please feel free to just reach out to me separately, either with an email question or a request to have a phone call with me. And good luck. I hope you all do it. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.